The waitress didn't know who the new customer at the corner window table was. She only bowed her head, smiled, and kept serving amidst a flurry of orders. Little did she know that weary smile of hers was about to shake an empire. The man wasn't an ordinary diner. Beneath the worn hoodie and thick glasses was Kareem Al-Hazari, the Arab billionaire who founded Al-Hazari's diner. Instead of chairing meetings in a lavish office, he quietly returned to where it all began, a small diner where every word and glance held more truth than any report. He wasn't there to eat. He was there to confirm his worst fear, that trust had been betrayed. And when he heard a stifled sob from the cramped kitchen, he knew he wasn't wrong. But what he didn't yet know was that this was just the first layer of dust brushed off a long, hidden, somber picture. Chapter 1. Kareem, the nameless billionaire. Without trust, numbers can easily deceive an entire empire. Kareem Al-Hazari sat in his marble-clad office, staring at a freshly printed report from the internal system. Revenue was steady, customer satisfaction was acceptable, and branches were listed as operating well. Everything met the standard, but he knew something was fracturing inside. Over the past week, he received 3 anonymous emails from former employees and 2 lengthy customer complaints detailing rude treatment, slow service, tense atmospheres, and managers without hearts. Though the founder of Al-Hazari's diner, a symbol of warm service and respect, Kareem had never felt so disconnected from his own ideals. And so he made a bold decision: leave the office, cancel board meetings, and shed his polished businessman persona. Days later, a stranger entered the Al-Hazari's diner branch on Chicago's outskirts. An unshaven beard, a faded brown hoodie, eyes hidden behind thick black glasses. No one recognized Kareem, the man once featured on the cover of Forbes Middle East, who started with a small food stall in Dubai to build a culinary empire across America. The lunchtime atmosphere caught him off guard. Though tables were full, the space lacked a strange vitality. Forced smiles. The clink of spoons against glasses echoed with tension. Staff moved frantically but avoided eye contact. Kareem chose a table by the window, sunlight filtering through dusty glass onto a scratched tabletop. Moments later, a young woman with a name tag approached. "Hi, sir. Welcome to Al-Hazari's. What can I get you?" Her voice tried to sound cheerful, but her eyes were deeply weary. Kareem replied softly, "Just a coffee for now, thank you." She nodded and hurried off. On her uniform was a faint stained sweat or spilled sauce, he wasn't sure. But one thing he was certain of: she was exhausted. When the coffee arrived, Kareem observed closely. Emily, as her name tag read, moved between tables with the precision of a seasoned worker. She took orders, wiped surfaces, apologized for late dishes, refilled water for a grumbling old man, and nodded through complaints despite her paling face. From the kitchen door, a stocky man shouted, "Emily, hurry up." "Where's order 17? Emily paused for a second, then replied without turning. "Almost ready," Sir Kareem followed her gaze. That voice, that public scolding. He saw no respect, only abused authority. He opened his small notebook and jotted down a few lines in elegant Arabic script. Stifling atmosphere. Staff suppressed. Manager verbally aggressive. The girl named Emily, her eyes are striking. He sipped the coffee, tasting a strange bitterness, not from the beans, but from something simmering within the organization he built. And Kareem knew. He hadn't seen it all yet. Tomorrow he'd return, but not just for coffee. Chapter 2. The sob in the cramped kitchen. Not every wound has a voice, but the stifled sobs in the kitchen that day spoke for them all. Kareem returned to the diner during the lunch rush the next day. Same disguise, wrinkled hoodie, tousled hair, black-rimmed glasses hiding most of his eyes. But this time he wasn't just observing, he was there to feel the truths no report could capture. Upon entering, he saw Emily struggling with a tray of steaming dishes, still forcing a faint smile for a customer complaining about a salad. She apologized softly, though the fault wasn't hers, then rushed off before her weary eyes could betray her. In 10 minutes, Kareem counted her serving 7 tables, delivering food, clearing plates, noting gluten-free requests, and handing menus to a group of students. Not once did she pause for a drink, let alone rest. Behind the counter, the espresso machine buzzed incessantly, like the knock of unrelenting pressure. The clatter of dishes echoed from the kitchen, followed by the familiar shout Kareem heard the day before. "Emily, slow again. Want me to carry it out myself?" Rick, the man in a grease-stained white apron, leaned out from the kitchen door glaring at her. Nearby customers glanced over, some frowning. Emily flushed but stayed composed, replying softly, "I'm just waiting for the soup to bring everything together to save a trip." Rick waved dismissively. "Excuses. If you can't keep up, maybe you're not cut out for this." The words cut straight through her dignity. Kareem saw Emily freeze. She turned and hurried toward the kitchen. The swinging door swayed for a moment before closing. Minutes later, a distinct sob echoed from behind that door, unmistakable and piercing. It was a sound Kareem didn't want to hear but knew he needed to. He walked to the counter, and pretended to study the menu posted by the kitchen door. Through a small gap, he saw Emily leaning against a sink, hands trembling as they touched her face, tears mixing with sweat. Rick stood across from her, arms crossed, growling, "I don't need weaklings in this kitchen. If you can't handle it, quit." Another voice, hesitant, spoke up. "Rick, she's been working since morning without a break." Kareem saw Connor, the young chef, his face youthful, but his eyes resolute. Rick glared. "Connor, get back to your pan. This isn't your business." Kareem gently pushed the kitchen door open. No one noticed him immediately. He stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "It seems she needs a break." Rick spun around, startled, as if a customer had wandered into restricted territory. Kareem didn't wait for a response. "I think a few minutes rest would help her work better. I'll wait for my order." Emily looked up, her red-rimmed eyes wide. Kareem met her gaze. "Go. Just 5 minutes." Rick opened his mouth to protest, but Kareem's glance silenced him. Emily said nothing, only nodded quietly and slipped out of the kitchen. Kareem returned to his table and sat. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, "She cried in the kitchen, not from weakness, but from being pushed to her limit." His eyes drifted to the kitchen door where Rick was still muttering, and Kareem knew this was only the tip of the iceberg. Chapter 3. Emily's shadowed past. Some carry their past quietly, but its echoes linger in the way they bow their heads and endure. The next morning, Kareem arrived earlier than usual. A thin Chicago fog softened the sunlight filtering through the diner's windows. Inside, only a few customers sipped coffee or read newspapers. Without the noise or rush, it was a rare moment when a real conversation could unfold. Emily was wiping the counter. Her apron was neater, but the weariness hadn't left her eyes. Kareem waited until she served coffee to an elderly customer, then signaled her. "Emily, may I have a minute?" She hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen, where Rick hadn't yet appeared, then nodded. They sat at a corner table by the window, where light slanted through thin curtains, gently touching the conversation about to begin. "How long have you worked here?" Kareem asked, his voice low but warm. "Almost 8 months," Emily replied absently, twisting a faded silver ring on her pinky. "Before that, I was at the downtown branch." "Downtown?" Kareem raised an eyebrow. "That's where our strongest team is." She gave a faint smile. "I was Employee of the Year there. Customers mentioned me in feedback every week. But then I had a car accident, had to take a few weeks off. When I returned, they said I'd been transferred here to cover a staffing shortage." Kareem said nothing. He knew the system allowed flexible transfers, but not as a way to sideline someone exceptional, just for being temporarily absent. Rick knows that Emily continued, her voice quieter. "I think he doesn't like me because I was praised. He always finds ways to put me down, like I need to be put in my place." Kareem looked at her, a quiet anger rising, not just at Rick, but at a system he trusted that seemed to be rotting. At that moment, Connor emerged from the kitchen, hands dusted with flour. He saw Kareem and Emily talking, hesitated, then approached. "Sorry to interrupt," he said softly, "but I think you should know." Kareem nodded encouragingly. Connor swallowed hard. "I'm the one who sent the anonymous email to headquarters 3 weeks ago. About Rick, about how he treats us." No one replied. "I thought maybe no one cared to read it." Emily looked at Connor, stunned. Kareem's hand tightened slightly under the table. "I read it," Kareem said quietly, "and I'm here because of it." The three fell silent for a moment. No more words were needed. The truth had revealed itself. Kareem stood. He glanced at the employee apron he wore, his hand brushing the embroidered words Al-Hazari's Diner, home with heart. But if the heart was worn out, could it still be called a home? And Kareem vowed silently that he would rebuild starting right here. Chapter 4. The mask falls before everyone. Some truths don't need to be shouted, they only need to be seen at the right moment. That afternoon, the diner was packed. The clink of cutlery rang steadily, children's chatter mixed with the hurried steps of staff. Emily, as usual, moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays, her voice steady with yes, sir, and sorry for the delay. Kareem sat in the corner, still in his unassuming guise, but his eyes had changed. He wasn't just watching anymore, he was waiting. An older man at a window table tapped his spoon on his plate, his voice sharp. "My eggs are overcooked. Can't you handle something simple?" Emily bowed her head, still calm. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll have the kitchen remake it right away." Before she could turn, Rick stormed out of the kitchen, his apron stained with sauce. "You again? How many times do I have to tell you to check the food before serving? You think this is a charity?" All eyes in the diner turned to them. A group of students stopped eating. A young mother holding her child shook her head. Emily froze but didn't respond. Her dignity seemed trampled with that outburst. Then a soft sound, a chair scraping. Kareem stood. He walked slowly to the center of the room, each step steady, his eyes fixed on Rick. In that moment, silence blanketed the diner, as if every sound paused to make way for what was coming. He pulled a slim wallet from his pocket, opened it, and held up an ID card with bold text, "Kareem Al-Hazari, CEO. Al-Hazari's Diner Group." Rick paled. Emily gasped. The room fell dead silent. Kareem spoke, his voice soft but heavy with weight. "I've heard enough, Rick. And I've seen more than enough." Rick stammered, I didn't know. I was just trying to keep things running smoothly." Kareem didn't reply. He said 4 words like a final door slamming shut. "To the office, now." The small office behind the kitchen held only 2 people. No noise, no audience, just raw truth. "Do you realize what you just did?" Kareem asked, eyes locked on Rick. Rick tried to deflect. "I was just doing my job." "She messed up." Kareem's voice was measured. "You humiliated an employee in front of customers. You've done it repeatedly, and you've turned a place meant to symbolize kindness into a battlefield." Rick lowered his head, silent. Kareem stood slowly. "You're fired. Effective immediately. HR will contact you for paperwork." Rick said nothing, his face ashen. Kareem opened the office door and stepped out, his face betraying fatigue. Connor stood by the stove, gripping a ladle tightly. Emily was near the counter, her eyes anxious. Kareem didn't speak to anyone, only glanced at Emily. It wasn't pity, it was affirmation. This isn't over, and he knew tomorrow he'd start the change. Not from a lavish office, but from the sweat-soaked floors of those who'd been forgotten. Chapter 5, Rising from the Ashes. Storms don't just destroy. Sometimes they clear the ground for new seeds. That evening, after the last customer left and the closed sign was hung on the glass door, Kareem asked all staff to stay for 15 minutes. No one spoke, but their eyes held a flicker of tension. Rick was gone, and they didn't know what was next. Kareem stood by the counter where everyone gathered. No files, no speech, just a grease-scented apron and eyes that truly listened. First, Kareem began. "I want to thank you, not for being perfect, but for pushing through exhaustion to keep this diner running." The room stilled. Kareem looked around, his gaze resting on Connor and Emily. "Starting tomorrow, we begin a new chapter, and for that, I need each of you to know you matter." He held up a printed sheet, hiring 3 new staff, rotating breaks with fixed meal times, new air conditioning next week, base salary adjusted by performance. "Oh, transparent monthly reward system." Connor looked up. Kareem smiled. "Connor," he said, "you stood up for a colleague when no one else dared." "I noticed. From today, you're assistant shift manager. No need to ask permission to do what's right anymore." Connor's eyes widened. I've never managed anything before." "You've managed with your heart," Kareem replied. "That's where all skills begin." Then he turned to Emily. "And Emily," she flinched, bracing for another scolding. But Kareem stepped closer, his voice slow and warm. "You've endured too much in silence, yet kept smiling, caring for customers, protecting your team. I don't need a report to see your value." Emily shook her head, lips pressed tight. Kareem didn't stop. "I want you in our senior management training program, and starting next week, your salary will be adjusted to match the person you've always been." For the first time, Emily's shoulders trembled. She tried to speak, but her voice caught. Tears fell not from pain, but from being seen. After so long, Kareem paused, then looked at the group. I was once a boy behind a kitchen, watching my mother get scolded for spilling a bowl of soup. She just bowed her head, never fighting back. I couldn't do anything then. So I built this diner chain, so no one like my mother would feel small for the work they do. This silence wasn't heavy. It was solemn, like the pause after a profound song. Kareem nodded gently. Tomorrow we start again, not to serve more, but to be more ourselves. When the lights flicked back on, something had changed. The space was the same old diner, but the lights seemed softer, warmer. Not from new bulbs, but from the glances from an atmosphere no longer weighed down. And Kareem knew the spark of revival had been lit bright enough to illuminate even the long-neglected shadows. Chapter 6. The Uninvited Guest and the Final Pledge. True change doesn't come from commands, it begins when an outsider notices it's already happened. At 9 p.m., Kareem stood by the diner's door holding his coat. He'd just finished a long day as an undercover leader, but this time the staff's looks toward him had shifted. No longer wary or fearful, but grateful and hopeful. The diner's lights cast a warm glow through the glass, reflecting Emily's gentle smile as she chatted with an elderly woman ordering dessert. Kareem was about to leave when a voice spoke behind him, calm but familiar. You don't need the disguise, Kareem Al-Hazari. He turned. A silver-haired man in a gray overcoat leaning on a wooden cane stood there. His eyes were deep and sharp, as if they'd seen through 1,000 hidden stories. You are? Kareem asked, brows furrowing. Michael D. Green, freelance investigative reporter. For 3 months, I've received 7 complaints about your diner chain, mostly about Rick and a few other managers. But I couldn't publish anything. No evidence. Kareem's face grew serious. Michael pulled a small recorder from his pocket. Yesterday, I was in the diner sitting near the kitchen. I recorded the entire exchange between Rick and Emily. The air between them grew heavy. For a moment, Kareem felt something larger than himself being unveiled. Thank you, Kareem said softly. Not just for the recording, but for not staying silent. Michael handed him the device and smiled faintly. Sometimes places built on vision collapse from the blindness of trust. Kareem nodded. His eyes hardened not with anger, but with resolve. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant's private number. Janet, cancel all meetings next week. And send me all personnel files. Performance reports, complaints for all 15 branches. I want to see every person, every manager, every anonymous email. A pause on the other end, then Janet replied, I'll get it done, Mr. Al-Hazari. Kareem hung up. He turned to the wooden sign on the door. Under the golden light, the carved words stood clear, Al-Hazari's Diner, where everyone is valued. Emily was just handing a warm tea to the elderly woman at the corner table, her face radiant. No longer weary, no longer guarded, just a gentle trust blooming on her lips. Kareem stepped back into the cool night, hand gripping the recorder, his eyes fixed on the sign. His fight was no longer about saving a diner, but about reclaiming the soul of a dream. And that dream from this moment had begun to live again. Kareem Al-Hazari's story isn't just about a billionaire seeking the essence of the empire he built. It's a mirror reflecting deep human values in modern life. In a world where success is often measured in numbers, Kareem chose to measure it by how people are treated, and that's the true achievement. Through Emily, the devoted waitress buried under invisible pressures, we see the need for compassion and leadership. Through Connor, the young chef who spoke out against injustice, we learn that courage doesn't depend on rank, but on genuine care. Michael Green, the reporter, quietly observing and recording the truth, underscores that lasting change requires both internal strength and an honest outside perspective. Ultimately, Kareem didn't just fix a branch, he restored the soul of his entire system through listening, empathy, and a promise to never let anyone be forgotten. And perhaps that's the core of a true organization where people matter more than profit.